Welcome back to Analytical Strategy. Today we are talking about 10 occasions where the person who got sent home was determined by activity that happened at Tribal Council. We are entering an era of Survivor where action and big plays at Tribal Council are becoming more prominent, with contestants constantly whispering, getting out of their seats and trying to persuade others at the very last minute to vote their way. Tribal Council is also evolving into a place where theatre is a major role in showing off your game to the jury. So not only can contestants be persuading other members of the tribe to vote their way, they may also be persuading the jury in the process. We're going to be talking about just 10 occasions where conversations, advantages, or a combination of both, specifically at Tribal, have dictated who went home that very evening. Firstly, we're going to be discussing 3 occasions where the person who went home came down to chance. That is right, it is through a tied vote scenario resulting in contestants going to a rock draw. So the first instance of the rock draw occurred in Survivor Marquesas, when it was a final 4 of Kathy, Freberg, Paschal and Nale. This situation will never occur again in Survivor, with this particular rock draw changing the rules and the game of Survivor forever. With an update to if there was a final 4 tiebreaker, it would go to a fire-making challenge, which was then again revised to updating to the compulsory fire-making challenge at Final 4. So 3 contestants in Paschal, Kathy and Nale all went to rocks at this stage of the game after the tied vote, leaving it all up to chance, with Paschal being the unfortunate member to draw that purple rock. Due to the rock draw with such small numbers left in the game, this rule was modified as the formula for the rock draw doesn't work with only 4 players left. There was also some controversy surrounding this rock draw, as based on the rules of the game at this time of filming, Nale and Kathy should have also become immune and Paschal should have left by default. You can see more information for this in a previous video of mine titled 3 Controversial Production Errors in Survivor, if you are unaware of this error occurring. Due to the fear of chance at the first ever rock draw created, the next rock draw didn't occur for 11 years, all the way up until season 27 Survivor Blood vs. Water. This probably went down to the most famous rock draw in history, and really paved the way for drawing rocks to be a legitimate strategy to try and regain control of the game, and also increase the threat of going home by chance. Hayden Moss, someone we need to see return to the game, was able to convince Cirie at Tribal Council to switch her vote from himself to voting for Monica to cause a 3 vs 3 split. This resulted in a deadlock, and with no changes on the revote, we witnessed the second ever rock draw, and Katie unfortunately being the one to obtain the white rock and head to redemption. The activity by Hayden at Tribal Council absolutely changed the vote and kept himself in the game. It was also comments from Jervis at Tribal that Hayden was able to use to his advantage to get Cirie on his side. It was an amazing move, and if it worked and Tyson drew the wrong rock, I think Hayden likely goes on and wins the game. Survivor can be a game of chance at times, and having luck on your side at times can be the difference between winning and losing the game. The third and final rock draw wasn't as distant as the first 2 were apart, with it occurring just 6 seasons later in season 33, Millennials vs Gen X. To me, this was a pretty interesting decision by the contestants in the final 10 to actually go to rocks, given the nature of the game in Modern Survivor, with the deck reshuffling after every vote, so to speak. So it was interesting to see them willing to go to rocks with so many people left in the game. There were conversations back and forth between David and Zeke's alliance at this tribal, with David obtaining what he believed to be intel from Adam when Adam overheard a conversation about the vote going towards Ken. David then played his idol on Ken unsuccessfully, and ironically, poor Jessica, the only one who really didn't want to gamble and go to rocks, almost switched her vote to Hannah, but in the end stuck with her numbers, and in this case drew the black coloured rock to go home. Each of these rock draws came down to chance, and chance alone is what caused Paschal, Katie and Jessica to go down in each of these historic tribal councils. Up next on the list of vote outs determined at Tribal Council, we have Cirie within Survivor Game Changers. Now this is maybe one of the more exciting, yet frustrating tribals in recent history, with Cirie again making it so deep into the game, being so close to winning again, never having her name written down in the entirety of the game, but going home due to advantage chaos occurring at Tribal. Ty protected Aubrey and himself with 2 idols. Sarah had the legacy advantage. Troy Zen then decided it would be best for him to play his idol as well, and given Brad had already won immunity, Cirie went home by default. No votes for Cirie had entered that urn in the entirety of Game Changers, so all of these advantages played at Tribal resulted in the first ever person to go home merely as she was the only one eligible to do so. It was a massive shame for Cirie, as she's been such a fantastic player over her 4 appearances on the show, and really, although she has never won the game, she is probably the closest to being a 3-time winner out of anyone to ever play the game. It was a crazy tribal, there were so many advantages, and it was really disappointing to see Cirie go home in the final 6. The next vote out determined a tribal had a really close relationship with Cirie in their original season, both making it to the final 4 in Survivor Panama, and that is the elimination of Danielle, DiLorenzo in Survivor Heroes vs Villains. This is one of the more interesting post-merge episodes of Heroes vs Villains, with the villains being in charge at this stage of the game and looking to begong the remainder of the heroes. That was until Russell Hantz became fearful of the relationship between Parvati and Danielle and how tight they were as a duo. As Parvati was Russell's closest ally, he wanted to ensure that he was also Parv's closest ally, and eliminating Danielle was his plan to pull this off. He firstly attempted to pit Parvati and Danielle against each other pre-Tribal Council, but they figured out Russell was lying and stuck together with the villains and went into Tribal planning on voting out Rupert. At the Tribal, however, Danielle revealed Jerry was not part of their original alliance to begin with, which caused Jerry to lose a bit of trust. After Russell was speaking down to Danielle at Tribal, she also crumbled a little bit and told Russell that her relationship with Parvati was much closer than he thought it was. Russell then whispered to Jerry to change her vote to Danielle, and due to this, together with the remaining heroes, Danielle went home that night. And that leads me to one of my favourite tribal councils in Survivor history for all of the wrong reasons, and that was Nale being eliminated in Survivor San Juan del Sur. Prior to this tribal, Reed was able to really pull off a phenomenal move, getting the majority alliance to split their votes to enable him to gather the players on the bottom to take out one of the biggest powerhouse players left in the game in John. He had pulled each player aside to ensure this happens, and the plan was in place leading in tribal for John to go home. Reed was playing it up perfectly at tribal, that he was with the majority alliance to split this vote and take out either Keith or Wes to flush their idol. Keith, however, didn't catch on that Reed was acting and said one of the most all-time great Survivor quotes to stick to the plan. This raised alarm bells amongst the other castaways immediately, and Natalie was clever enough to figure out that John was in trouble. Prior to the votes being read, she told John to play his idol, which he did successfully. Keith then had to play his idol as well, which resulted in his son Wes going home with the only remaining player to receive any votes. This tribal involved some of the best and some of the worst Survivor gameplay ever, and it was those 4 little words by Keith at tribal which changed the course of this game. If Keith stuck to his plan and trusted Reed, we may have seen a very different ending to Survivor San Juan del Sur. And up next, we're going to be talking about Kimmi's elimination from Survivor Second Chance. Firstly, Kimmi's game in Cambodia was so underrated. She played extremely well in the end and got caught out trying to make her big final move, which, if successful, probably would have won her the game. It was a final 6 with Kimmi, Jeremy, Tasha, and Spencer controlling the numbers, with Keith and Kelly Wentworth on the outer. Kimmi devised a plan to tell the other 3 members of her alliance to split the vote, so she could jump on board with Kelly and Keith in a 3-2-1 vote split to take out Jeremy. A really smart play if it would have worked out. However, Spencer was able to read Kimmi perfectly, figure out her plan, and go into tribal with a plan of his own to ensure Jeremy, Tasha, and himself were safe. Spencer announced that they were not going to split the vote, and the 3 of them were going to vote as a block, which nullified Kimmi's plan, which would result in a 3 vs 3 split. Wentworth and Jeremy both played idols to protect themselves, which revealed to Jeremy Kimmi's plan, and on a revote, it was a tie between Kimmi and Tasha. As Spencer, Jeremy, and Wentworth were safe, the decision was either Keith going home by default with Kimmi and Tasha being safe after the tied vote, or a unanimous decision would need to be made to vote out Kimmi, as Jeremy and Spencer were never going to allow Tasha to go home. Keith firstly offered to leave the game, but again, it was these decisions that happened at Tribal, with Kelly persuading him to stay, which ended in Kimmi leaving the game. A really crazy Tribal with such high level gameplay, and it was a big part of what made Survivor Second Chance so successful. So up next is the only pre-merge vote out to make this list, with Brad Culpepper's elimination from Survivor Blood vs Water. Brad at this stage of the game was viewed as the kingpin, the person calling all of the shots, which resulted in him taking a lot of heat during the duels from the other tribe and the voted out contestants at Redemption. Brad was definitely the one running the game at this stage, putting in place each person to go home, inclusive of his good friend John to flush the immunity idol in a previous vote. Brad again was leading the charge back at camp, telling the girls to vote out Caleb as his loved one in Colton was no longer in the game due to him quitting, and telling the boys in his alliance to vote out Cirie. At Tribal, however, Caleb confronted Brad about campaigning against him, which actually startled Brad and made him stumble over his words a little bit, stating it wasn't a campaign, but discussions were made. This made Caleb made a huge move in letting Cirie and Katie know that he was going to vote for Brad, which likely switched their votes off Caleb and onto Brad at that very Tribal. This resulted in a tied vote between Cirie and Brad, and with Vetus switching his vote on the revote with the fear of rocks, he sent Brad to redemption. It was a really big move by Caleb at Tribal to get Brad out of the game, and it was these conversations specifically at Tribal which caused it to happen. So up next, we're going to be discussing Malcolm's vote out in Survivor Game Changers, in a twist that potentially changed Survivor forever, unless new rules are introduced to monitor player activity at Tribal. This Tribal required 2 tribes to attend a Tribal at once, but to only vote off 1 person. Now this may have changed the game, with JT being the first person to get out of his seat at Tribal to discuss options with the other tribe, as he was previously aligned with them prior to the tribe swap. Malcolm's tribe was planning to vote out Sierra Dawn Thomas. However, at Tribal, JT let this information slip to a close alliance member of his in Brad Culpepper. This gave Brad's side of the numbers the insight on who Ty could play his idol for in Sierra Dawn Thomas. Haley Ford's pitch to target strong physical threats was trying to hint to her old tribe to take out Brad, but in turn it may have switched up the vote for Malcolm to be eliminated. Malcolm held in a vomit before being another huge name eliminated early in this game-changing season. So the standing up and discussions has now become almost a staple in Survivor at Tribal Councils, and none have been more chaotic as Julia's elimination in Survivor: The Edge of Extinction. Now going into this Tribal, I think Julia was playing a great game, and I really do not think she was on anybody's radar to go home, and it was purely the events of this Tribal which resulted in her elimination. The Karma group prior to this Tribal seemed to get back together after Eric's elimination, to either take out Kelly Wentworth or David Wright from the old Lesu tribe. Based on some of the information Aurora leaked during that Tribal, Rick Devens was able to pounce on this and try and form a new alliance of the 5 old Lesu tribe members, in addition to Ron and Julie, who were left out of the last vote. This attempt to rally up this new alliance at Tribal resulted in chaos, to say the least. The passenger versus pilot discussion really was pivotal in this season, and specifically, Julia targeting Rick for being a passenger may have put her in the firing line to go home. After Rick's proposal, people leaving their seats and whispering went probably the most insane at a Tribal and completely changed the vote. It was the definition of a live Tribal. After all the chaos that ensued, everybody except for Aurora decided to vote for Julia, and she was sent to the edge of extinction. Arguably the craziest Tribal of all time, and definitely one where the person voted out was decided then in that very moment. I am curious to hear what you guys think about these rules of Survivor. Do you think that whispering and getting out of your seat should be allowed at Tribal Councils? Please let me know down in the comments of your opinion. I would love to hear them. I also just want to give a big shout out to Once Upon an Island for sharing my content and assisting with my viewer engagement. His content is absolutely amazing. So as soon as you have clicked that subscribe button on my channel, make sure you head over to Once Upon an Island and enjoy the story of Survivor he tells so perfectly. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Analytical Strategy signing out once again, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.